Hello, and welcome to Music Theory Review, Episode 2, Rudiments of Musical Notation. The first thing we're going to learn about in this video are the staff, and staves, the plural of staff, and how to read notes on the staff and or staves that you will be exposed to in your musical career. So right here, I have constructed what is known as the grand staff, which is a treble clef linked to a bass clef, hooked together by this really pretty bracket thing. If you really don't do much note reading at all, a great place to start is working up from the bass clef. This first space on the bass clef is A. The line above it is B. The line above that is C. We're all in college. I hope we all know our alphabet, so you can work your way up from that bottom space in bass clef all the way up. And then when you get to here, it's middle C, which connects here, is the same middle C in treble clef. It's basically like they drew a line between the two clefs, but they just left more space than they needed. So this is middle C, same note, and then it works up C, D, E, F, and so on and so forth. It's also just really good just to remember that this is middle C, because sometimes you're only going to be given a treble clef and you can't work your way all the way up, like if you had to identify, say, this note. Take a long time to work your way up from A down here, and that leaves a lot of room for mistake. So it's a good idea to work on memorizing it, but if that's not an option right now, it's great to remember that this is middle C, right here, one ledger line below the treble clef. Which brings me nicely to my next point of ledger lines. Think how boring music would be if we had to stay within these notes here, and you couldn't go any higher or any lower. That'd be really boring. So there's this nifty little thing called ledger lines. So we're playing something in bass clef, and we want to play a D above middle C. So you write it above middle C. So remember, this is middle C. On this ledger line, one note above it would be D. This is G in treble clef, written below the staff. This is E in bass clef, written one ledger line below the staff. You can go above or below as many as you want. That's how ledger lines work. Now you're all probably pretty familiar with treble clef and bass clef. We see them pretty frequently. What you may not be quite so familiar with are alto clef and tenor clef. I have written them out very nicely for you here. They look extremely, extremely similar to each other. The only difference is that in alto clef, this nice little arrow here in the middle of this kind of weird 3-looking thing is on middle C, and it is the middle line. In tenor clef, it's also on middle C, but it is the second line from the top. This can get kind of confused, like it's really easy to mix them up. So this is the best thing that I've figured out as a test for remembering. If you just see this and you're like, oh, am I in alto clef or am I in tenor clef? In alto clef, you have middle C. I mean, it's pointing here on this little line right in the middle. If you draw a vertical line through that horizontal line, you get a plus sign. Now, in this clef, where it's second from the top, you start out and you draw that horizontal line, you draw a vertical line, you end up with a T, not a plus sign. T is the first letter of the word tenor. Ergo, the tenor clef makes the T. If you get a plus sign, it's alto clef. Who wants to talk about octave designations? I do! Pick me! As you've probably come to realize in your first 2 weeks of theory class, there's a lot of different C's on the keyboard and on the musical staves. There's a lot of different A's and B's and things of that nature. They are not all the exact same note. Some of them have a lower pitch. Remember when we were talking about frequencies and how a lower frequency gives a lower pitch, higher frequency gives a higher pitch? That all ties into this idea of octave designations and the difference between pitches and pitch class. Now, you have middle C. It is a C. There is a C above middle C. Those are not the same pitch. They are the same pitch class. Every C on the keyboard is the same pitch class, but every C on the keyboard is a different pitch. The same goes for all of the other notes on the keyboard. Every G is a different pitch, but they are all in the same pitch class. So any note that is exactly an octave apart from another note, those two notes are in the same pitch class. This leads into octave designations. Each octave on the keyboard is designated, well, kind of 0, mostly 1 through 8, kind of. I'll get into this a little bit more now. So the very first note on the very lowest end, on the left end of the keyboard, is A0. Once it goes A0, B flat 0, B0, then you get to C1. The octave designations always start over on C. So that third note on the keyboard, C1, an octave above that is C2. An octave above that is C3. An octave above that is middle C, which is C4. Now, it's important to remember that C4 is middle C, and the only way I could think of giving y'all a hint to remember that is when you make a sign language C and you count how many fingers are making it. You don't count your thumb because it's not really a finger, and you have 4 fingers making the C. I know it's really stupid, but sometimes really stupid things help me remember stuff, so I hope it helps you remember stuff too. The octave designations keep working up the keyboard until the very last C on the keyboard, which is in fact the highest pitch on the keyboard, which is C8. And now we get to learn about the chromatic scale. The word chromatic comes from the Latin word chroma, which means colorful. Chromatics are what make our music interesting. You may have seen sharps and flat signs within your lifetime that take the music out of the specific key that it's written in and add something kind of spicy in there. Yeah, right? So we call sharps, flats, and naturals accidentals. Anything that isn't in the key signature itself is considered an accidental. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is sharp signs. This is a sharp sign. Hashtag sharp sign. Woot woot. Now, a good way that I like to remember that sharp signs raise the pitch by a half step. Okay, up by half step when you see a sharp sign. So it'd be like do, D instead of do, re, which is a whole step. So half step, and you know it goes up because this is pointing upward. You have an upward arrow there. Then you have flats. It's not a lowercase b. It is a flat sign. These lower the pitch by a half step. So it'd be do, ti. Got it? Now you know that these lower the pitch because what do you know? It also makes a neat little arrow pointing down at the bottom of the flat sign. I'm going to rewrite it over here for clarification though. I'll rewrite this as well. Okie dokie. So these are sharps, flats, and then if you have sharps and flats already built into your key signature, which we will get to at a later date, so just trust us on this one, you have these nifty little things called natural signs, which either, it just makes it a C instead of a C sharp or a C flat. It's just plain old C or plain old A. Then we get into these really fun things called double sharps and double flats. A double sharp looks like this. It's like a little X with little boxes on the side. And it raises the pitch a whole step. And then you also have your double flats, which lower the pitch a whole step. And I know you're all thinking, well, if they're gonna go and put an F double sharp in there, why don't they just call it G? And we haven't gotten to key signatures yet, so I can't explain that without really confusing you. Just have faith. Have faith. So that is what I have for video 2. I hope this helps you out with all of your studies, and good luck with music theory, future musicians of the world.